This week, the Catholic pro-family kicker who caused a stir earlier in the year lands a massive new contract. Stunning new details on the failures of the Secret Service that nearly led to Donald Trump's assassination. And why are New Jersey schools surveying public school students over highly personal subjects in class? These stories and a lot more on deck this week on The Lion Week in Review. Welcome into this week's edition of The Lion Week in Review. It's a weekly look at the culture, the courts, your state capitol, and your kids. I'm Chris Stigall. And now let's meet our panel, some of the men and women behind the stories at ReadLion.com. Josh Mann is managing editor. Michael Ryan, the executive editor of The Lion, and Valerie Cabana, media contributor here at The Lion. Panel, welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
This week, again, it seems there's not a week that goes by where the issue of men in women's sports is a dominant story. We've talked about the Olympics now underway. We talked about the opening ceremony. Now debate about whether boxers are in fact men or women. There's real confusion. I honestly had a conversation with someone this week who argued with me that in fact the biological male that punched the Italian boxer so hard she quit, someone had an argument with me that no, in fact, that was not a woman. Josh, there's a lot of confusion over the story. Can you clear it up?
Well, I can try to. I mean, Amain Khalif is the Algerian boxer that you mentioned, and the IBA last year, the International Boxing Association, actually pulled her from her gold medal match in 2023 because apparently her testosterone levels were exceeded what they had ruled would allow females in that category to box. And then one of those officials also had said, told Russian media that she has XY chromosomes. Now, if that's true, it has fueled some speculation that perhaps this athlete's born with what are called differences of sexual development, and so some kind of intersex condition. So she may well have been born and presented as female, and of course in Algeria, transgenderism is not something that would be accepted. And so I think there is some complexity to her condition, but her biology was such that the IBA determined it was not fair for the athlete to compete. And so there is still a lot of controversy around somebody with male biology who may have all of the advantages of male puberty fighting against a female boxer. And in this case, Italy's boxer actually ended up quitting the bout after just 46 seconds.
Just so we're clear, Michael Ryan, and I haven't lost my mind, the XY chromosome still makes you a male. Has that changed?
I'm not sure at this point. I'm kind of muddled on that, Chris. All I can tell you is that this issue did not come about because of activists or anybody like that. This was complaints from coaches at the International Boxing Association level. And so the boxers in question agreed to blood testing. So they did blood testing, and it showed, the first testing showed that they were disqualified for women's events. So one of them went on to win a silver, and then another one went on to win a gold in the IBA event. And then they did a second testing, finding the same result, identical result, that they were not qualified to box in the women's division. So they were disqualified at the IBA level.
Valerie, again, I just, science is a scientific matter. Mm-hmm. If there's the presence of the male chromosome, by definition, our recent visit with Riley Gaines, she made this point, that by definition makes you a man.
Yeah, and it's hard to, look at this situation because it is truly unique, because we know it's not a transgender human. We know that it is someone who was raised as a female, and if they are intersex or have the DSD condition, then that's something that she's probably struggled with her entire life, and maybe she does struggle with her identity. And so in this situation, I do think that compassion is necessary, because we want to care about her as a human. But if she has that XY chromosome, unfortunately, she's at a biological advantage against the average woman. And as a woman, I think that fairness in women's sports is still extremely important. And she kind of has a superpower, and it's not fair to the other women.
I don't think you'll get any argument from sane people. But we move on to public school finances. Michael Ryan, this is something that public schools we continue to report on at the Lion. They're diminishing because more and more people, I think, are choosing to leave public school, which means fewer dollars sent to the school districts. Is that about right? Moody's is starting to talk about real financial trouble for some public schools out there.
Absolutely. You know, at the Herzog Foundation, which we all work for and write for, we do trainings here in how to start, run, and finance Christian schools and private schools. Public schools have never really had to worry about that because of the tax base. And but now the crunch is on for several reasons. Number one, the end of all this extraordinary COVID funding from the federal government. You got plunging enrollment with the baby bust, as it were, and you have yet climbing salary costs for teachers and other staff. So what are they going to do? Are they going to just turn to higher taxes? That's going to be a little problematic going forward, I think. And, oh, by the way, you know, it's not as if the UAW could just dial up higher taxes when they were faced with competition from foreign markets. No, they had to get better. The auto workers, the auto companies had to get better. Competition just makes you better.
And we're seeing in many cases, Josh, when raising funds at the taxpayer level comes up on a ballot, increasingly taxpayers are rejecting that.
Yeah, I think they're fatigued. I mean, they're taxed out, and we've seen property taxes in cities across the U.S. New property assessments have gone up. You know, there's a lot of factors at play there, but the short of it is that homeowners don't want to see their taxes go up, and they're kind of maxed out. Some are getting taxed out of their own homes. Of course, property taxes are one of the main local sources of funding for school districts, in addition to about half of every state's budget. And so the system has as much money as it probably will have for the foreseeable future. And with more staff and fewer students, it's just unsustainable. I mean, there's just something's going to happen. Something's got to give. And I think it's, on the bright side, it creates this environment for disruption and thinking entrepreneurially. And we see school choice booming. We see alternatives to public education booming. And so I think it's a great time for parents to think about what are our options.
So, Valerie, it's not just school choice. I mean, it is that maybe taxpayers are saying no thank you, or they're not necessarily happy with the services provided, or, you know, in many cases, aging populations in high-tax areas, they're going and appealing their taxes that go to schools, saying, hey, this is way too much, and they're often getting cut. So you're kind of wondering almost if the public school model is kind of going the way of the buggy whip.
Yeah, it is. And not all public schools, but several do fall in this category. I mean, several hundreds of thousands fall into this category. And like we said, that doesn't make all public schools bad. However, education is changing, and it's something that we are constantly talking about here. And so we have to be okay with that. We have to accept that it's changing. We need to move forward with it.
Michael Ryan has the privilege to talk with senators, politicians of all stripes many, many times, including two real conservative stars, certainly in the United States Senate, in Josh Hawley and Eric Schmidt. You've talked with Eric Schmidt recently, whose name is pretty well known when it comes to Supreme Court cases. Now that he's a senator, he has a lot to say. I think he's on the Senate Judiciary Committee as well. Michael, you've recently talked with him about what this upcoming presidential election might mean for Supreme Court appointments.
Yeah, and Eric Schmidt is actually the one who filed the lawsuit when he was Missouri Attorney General, challenging Biden administration censorship of conservatives online. You know, President Biden, on the way out of office, has proposed 3 reforms to the Supreme Court. One is a constitutional amendment saying that presidents don't have immunity from criminal charges, which the Supreme Court really already ruled on that. Term limits for justices, which is a little problematic in that it makes it more political for the court, and the courts shouldn't be political. And the other is a code of ethics for the justices, which is problematic in the sense that this is a co-equal branch of government, and I don't know that you can have the legislature or the executive branch telling the courts how to police themselves. All this seems to be, I think, in the minds of a lot of conservatives, probably in the mind of Senator Schmidt. All this seems to be a precursor to expanding the number of justices on the high court and perhaps packing the court with liberals to immediately flip the ideological shift on the court. It seems to be, in the minds of conservatives, the one branch of government that the leftist agenda isn't getting very far with. Although I would take issue with President Biden's kind of characterization of the Supreme Court as being rogue. That lawsuit that Schmidt filed over Biden administration censorship of conservatives was thrown out by this court.
Yeah, and interestingly, just this week, the Supreme Court decided to not get involved in the case in Manhattan with Donald Trump. So, every time it seems they kind of go at the court for defending Donald Trump, then they kind of rule in the opposite way. And Valerie, I'd just say the most recent appointment to the Supreme Court, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Jackson Brown, I always forget. But anyway, she famously can't define what a woman is when asked in Senate testimony. I mean, that from one woman to the other, is that alarming when a Supreme Court justice can't define what a woman is?
That says a lot. Why are we struggling with that? A woman, 2 X chromosomes, period. You're born that way. You can't change.
See, this keeps to be, it's a running theme here on the show. Josh, let's turn to the Secret Service story that you have been all over. We've talked a lot about this Butler, Pennsylvania assassination. Even though a lot of the media wants to move on, you guys at The Line continue to dig on the story.
Yeah, we do, and we still have a lot of questions. And in fact, one of our Missouri senators, Josh Hawley, has a lot of questions, and he has perhaps more than any senator on Capitol Hill been going viral because he's trying to hold the acting director of the Secret Service, Ronald Rowe, to account. He is basically grilling these federal agency heads, trying to get answers. And so, it was 17 days and 18 days and 20 days and now 20-something days, and we still don't really know the motive of the shooter. And there are a number of questions that they're simply not answering. And so Hawley is, his stance is, look, we're going to ride these people hard and ask and demand answers and hold them accountable. To Ronald Rowe, he said, have you fired anybody? He asked him and then demanded essentially that he has to hold people accountable. They haven't fired a single person.
Michael, this story in a sane time, in a different time, maybe even a decade ago or 20 years ago, a former president of the United States and nominee to run again for president of the United States, nearly being killed on the campaign trail would be an all-consuming media story for weeks, if not months, until you got to the bottom of it. Now, it's like, that was then, we've moved on. It's kind of remarkable. Thankfully, Josh Hawley is not.
Well, yeah, I mean, the news cycle is speeding so fast we can't catch up, and, there seems to be a different scandal every week, and it just kind of goes off the front pages after a couple of days, and the media have kind of moved on from an almost assassination of a president, and it seemed to. I wrote a story a couple of weeks ago that Josh Hawley, the senator from Missouri, seems to be actually getting more information to us than the government is getting about this event. He had an absolute epic grilling of Secret Service acting director before Congress. And I was talking to Senator Hawley, and he was talking about how the Secret Service is covering their backsides and not giving us information about this. And I asked him what the difference is between covering your backside and just covering up. And basically he said there is no difference. So he's basically covering it. He's calling it a cover-up. And I think, and his other point is that the Secret Service leadership is actually not only just failing the country, but failing their own agents.
And finally, the last story of the show this week is this constant attempt by school districts, whether it's California as a state or individual school districts, parents being left in the dark about conversations teachers, staff, administrators, whatever, counselors are having with students, Valerie. These stories keep coming up. I find them to be, as a parent, the most alarming of all. It's basically the state coming in between the relationship of kids and their parents. What do you know?
So this story specifically, New Jersey students were surveyed, and they were asked questions about their sex, their gender identity, their religion. And my question is, why are we asking students about their religion? Are we trying to discriminate against them? Is that why we're doing that? I have 2 siblings who are actually in the New Jersey public school system, and I'm so glad that they're not in this school district, because I would be really upset if they were coming after them. And I can imagine that parents are feeling the exact same way. We need to stop teaching gender identity. You are deceiving children. You're teaching mental illness. So just stop and just mind your business and teach the basic subjects that you need to be teaching in public school.
Michael, it seems to me that when students are asked right off the top survey questions like these, as Valerie said, it's almost profiling kids. Like, we need to kind of understand their point of view. More importantly, maybe the point of view at home is what they're trying to get at.
Yeah, and without any parental notice, without any parental, assent, and even the Biden Department of Education sided with the parents on this. I think that's very striking. These are subjects that the parents want discussed in certain ways, in ways they want to discuss them. And I do think it's an important question to ask. What are they doing with this information? And the other thing is, are they just looking at students now as potential voters and future consumers? Is that the problem here? It just seems like subtle manipulation.
This is a close cousin to the story, Josh, of Gavin Newsom and the law he signed in the last few weeks in California that effectively makes it legal for teachers, staff, what have you at schools to have conversations with kids in private and keep it from parents. And it's perfectly legal, as a matter of fact. That's something he just signed into law. Really alarming.
It's really alarming. Yeah, they're moving the opposite direction that a lot of parents want to see schools move, and they're actually doubling down and saying that school boards can't ban teachers from telling parents or telling students without the parents' knowledge. And so what a lot of parents want to see is they actually want to see policies that disallow teachers from hiding their kids' gender identity or other kinds of decisions like this, which, by the way, have a lot to do with their medical histories. And we don't give aspirin to students without permission. So certainly when kids are trying to make decisions of this magnitude, we need to involve parents. And so it's sad to see that Newsom and a lot of the liberals in California are moving that way. And I think we're going to continue to see that kind of exodus of center and right of center parents leaving that state.
It's going to be very interesting to see how relevant this particular story and stories like these are in this presidential election this fall. Well, before we wrap up, we always like to turn to the panel and ask them their favorite stories of the week at readlion.com. Michael, how about you?
Yes, sir. The headline is "Freedom is on a Roll. Lawsuits for COVID vaccine religious exemptions piling up wins since Supreme Court ruling." It looks like the COVID mandates are looking worse and worse in the rearview mirror.
Josh Mann?
We just published a story about Harrison Butker, the Chiefs kicker, who went viral in May after giving a pro-family and a pro-faith speech at a Catholic college. He just got a massive contract extension, and so the Chiefs are really pleased with their kicker and his performance on the field, and have to say I'm really pleased with his performance off the field.
Yeah, that is kind of a question. I typically wouldn't ask you to expand, but do you read that as they're more pleased with his personal point of view or his performance on the field, or maybe a little of both?
I think it's performance on the field, but I do credit some of his teammates who are a lot more shy about expressing their views, who have stood up for him, including Chiefs head coach Andy Reid. And
the Hunt family.
Yeah, that's right. And so I think it's a good thing, and I think it is a nod to freedom of speech, and so kudos to the Chiefs.
Valerie, your favorite this week?
First of all, go Chiefs. We're so excited for that. My favorite story is the one that we talked about today about the New Jersey school district that surveyed their students extremely inappropriately. And the reason that that's my favorite is because there are people who still don't believe that this is happening. And so we are going to continue to fight to bring awareness to these things until every single parent knows what's happening in their school district.
All right. Panel, thank you very much. That'll do it for this week's edition of the Lion Week in Review. Be sure to keep up to date on all the latest news every day at readlion.com. And for all of us at the Lion, thanks for downloading the show, and we'll see you next time.